For a president known for his unpredictability, Donald Trump's sudden U-turn late last night, urging Republicans to vote to release the Epstein files, shouldn't be a surprise. And yet it is. Posting on Truth Social, the president said it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetuated by radical left lunatics, going on to say, nobody cared about Jeffrey Epstein when he was alive, and if the Democrats had anything, they would have released it before our landslide election victory. Some members of the Republican Party are being used, and we can't let that happen.
Unfortunately, it has all come down to the Epstein files, and that is shocking.
One of the used Republican members he may be referring to is his longtime ally turned critic, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who he has called a traitor.
I believe the country deserves transparency in these files, and I don't believe that rich, powerful people should be protected if they have done anything wrong. And so I'm standing with the women, and I will continue to do my small part to get the files released.
The president has faced pressure from both outside and within the Republican Party. Yesterday, the House Speaker said releasing the files should help put to rest allegations that the president had any connection to Epstein's abuse and trafficking of underage girls.
He had nothing to do with it. President Trump has clean hands. He's not worried about it. I talk to him all the time. He has nothing to do with this. He's frustrated that they're turning it into a political issue, and it's not surprising because the Democrats have nothing else to talk about.
The publication of more than 20,000 pages of Epstein emails just last week has only added more pressure to release the remaining documents. Some of the emails mention the president. In an email sent to Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011, the prolific sex offender Jeffrey Epstein said,
I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there.
The White House claimed the victim reference was prominent Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre, who has said on numerous occasions that President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing. In another one of the exchanges published by the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, the journalist Michael Wolff advised Epstein to talk about his connection with Trump before a CNN presidential debate in 2015.
I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards.
Epstein asks,
if we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be?
I think you should let him hang himself.
Wolff replied. In a separate exchange, Epstein told Wolff Trump knew about the girls, though it was not clear what that phrase meant. Donald Trump has denied any wrongdoing and said that he fell out with Epstein years before the disgraced financier's convictions. But Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have said the messages raised serious questions about Donald Trump and his knowledge of Epstein's horrific crimes.
I was 14.
What followed actually is a really powerful a clip of the victim saying, I was 14 years old, I was 12 years old, I was 15. It brings home sort of the heinous nature of what was going on under Jeffrey Epstein. But let's first take the Trump reversal. And I'll let you start, Gary. And I had some thoughts also on how this is sort of a reversal publicly, but actually he's working to make sure we don't get information by opening these other investigations into everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, first, Mark, I think it's really, really important. I mean, this thing has become so politicized, as you know, for so long. I'm glad you're going to perhaps talk more later in the show about the actual victims themselves. I mean, you know, it probably goes without saying, but I'm going to say it. That's where the focus really needs to be long term. These women, it's just remarkably horrific, the stories, one after another. And these women, many of them still suffering to this day because of the abuse. So I think it's really important to recognize that there are many, some saying as many as hundreds of victims in this thing. So,
but just to interrupt, Gary, I mean, you don't hear Trump talking about the victims. He doesn't. I mean, this is absolutely, it was a hoax. Mark, this is a Democratic hox that, he maintains that. So I'm just Mark, saying that, go ahead.
I'm trying to depoliticize this moment. Okay. We're going to get to Trump in a moment. But I'm simply saying, regardless of who is or isn't saying, I frankly don't care, whether their credibility is 0 or 100, the women deserve to be heard. I mean, and that is absolutely unequivocally important. Now, as far as Trump's reversal, this is pure politics 101. It was obvious, the votes, once we got to the middle of last week, and it was clear that there were votes in the House as you well know, both with the newly seated Democratic congresswoman who put the vote count over the top, along with a couple of Republicans. Then it became obvious to Mike Johnson, the vote's going to happen. Let's schedule it as soon as possible. And then secondly, I think it became more and more clear that there's an awful lot, as you know, Mark, of Republican members of Congress who have been under tremendous pressure in the last year to vote to release those Epstein files. And so now that you have the tipping point, the number of members required to actually force the release of the files, now it was widely expected there's going to be, Massey himself, the congressman from Texas, who's kind of been on the Republican charge of this thing, said there could be as many as 100 Republican members of the House that vote in favor of the release. The dam is broken, Mark, is the point. And Johnson realized that. He's a smart vote counter. That's why they're going to hold this vote, it looks like, tomorrow. And that's why last night, kind of 12th hour, I'm sure Trump's advisors told him, look, it's going to be best for you politically and best for our members of the House who have to run next year. They've got to maintain the MAGA base, who, as you know, is big on releasing the files. And in many of these moderate districts, they cannot vote against this. So that's where you are. That's a pretty simple, raw political calculation.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying in the first half hour, that it reminded me a bit of I don't know what the conversation really was. I've now read a bunch of different reporting on it with Joe Biden saying, "Hey, look, we've counted the votes. This is this is how it's going to go down, dude. So you don't want to be part of this anymore." I think I don't think anybody had to have that conversation with Trump that way. But he's so he's keen on which way the wind is blowing. But I wonder if you could just comment on the second part of what I was saying, which is that Trump, by calling for the investigations, and by the way, you'd concede, I think this is something of a watershed moment where the president says, "I want you to investigate, Democrats who are connected to Epstein," and then the attorney general, this is the watershed part, goes, "Yes, sir, we're going to investigate the connection between Democrats and Jeffrey Epstein." So that's the weird, as I say, maybe watershed political part. But I'd also suggest to you that there's something else going on there, which is by opening investigations, they are able to conceal the release of certain information because it's under investigation. Isn't that right?
Well, that's all yet to be sorted out, Mark. I think right now what's become clear is there's not going to be any long-term hiding of this Epstein stuff. I don't care who's spoken about. I don't want to joke and say it could be the Pope, okay? It's not, all right? But I'm simply saying it could be anybody. Everybody, of course, is waiting for so-called bated breath. Is Clinton going to be mentioned by name, right? Are there other heavyweight political figures? We already know about Prince Andrew and all of that shenanigans going on, with the royals. But what about major CEOs? There's a lot of people, who've been waiting. Who is actually going to be named in these files? It's going to be a problem for whoever is. I don't care, investigation or not. What we know about this, Mark, and we saw this last week, the Democratic members who released certain emails related to Trump, but there's not going to be any hiding any of this. So much of it has already been exposed to the committee. There's no doubt going to be leaks. If things are, if people try to put some of this under a rock or under a rug, it's going to come out. And I think that the smart people in Congress have already sort of, counted the odds of this and said, you know what? This dam is already broken maybe a year ago. Just get it all out there now. And also in terms of smart politics, be it Trump, Republicans, or even Democrats, better to do it now, a year before the midterms. You know how this goes. Let this runaway train go for the next 6 months because you don't want this coming out 30 days before a midterm.
It's funny, Gary, it strikes me as you're speaking, Congress, because you're talking about, are the votes there? And there is so much political calculus associated with, who's up for re-election, who's protecting what seats. The reality is you don't necessarily even need Congress to get these Jeffrey Epstein files or the information around Jeffrey Epstein released from the Justice Department. Bondi could do that, couldn't she?
Well, she could. She's going to feel constrained. You make an important point, Mark. She's going to feel constrained and legally constrained to release things that could be related to charges against a specific individual, right? Not more generally, but if there's somebody named, and there's potential indictments, for some of these people, even the defense attorneys obviously wouldn't want anything released, right? They'd be the first ones to crow and say, wait a minute, you can't just put stuff about my client out there. If you're going to charge them with something into the public domain, let's see it. Let's, put it in an indictment, let a judge decide whether it can be released or not. So that's where things get really sticky in the legal arena. But my basic contention, Mark, is regardless of who is charged or not charged, these documents now have a sort of almost de facto public domain to them. They're going to come out. I mean, whether it's committee staff or whoever that finally makes sure that every one of these pages is released, I truly believe that that's going to happen.
Yeah, we've seen some version of that with what we were talking about, which is the Epstein estate releasing things. So that's a really, really perhaps transcendental point that you're making. I want to ask you about MAGA, and then I'm going to get to Venezuela and I'll let you go. But I want to ask you about MAGA as a movement and where they stand. There seems to be maybe some fractures in what seemed a completely solid revolution that was going on in America and the rise of MAGA. Can you give me a moment on that, where you see them perhaps losing faith in the chief executive, in Trump? MAGA was sort of America first, right? And I know there's been, and again, this might be a little too wonky. I don't know how much of this is filtered down to the MAGA movement. I don't even know what the MAGA movement means. Maybe you can tell me, but I know that it's a coalition big enough to have ascended as they did. But, when you talk about the changing visa programs, for example, that Trump has backed, when you talk about the influx of the Chinese students, it all seems to, in some way, and I know among some MAGA faithfuls, undermine a kind of notion that they have about this is America first and Americans first, Mr. President, and you're selling out that information, the bailout of Argentina. What are you doing with the promise of MAGA? Speak to the movement and where that sits now.
Yeah, well, Mark, you used a word that I think is exceptionally important and many people don't understand about MAGA and is too infrequently mentioned, and that is coalition. People see MAGA as a unified bloc where everybody believes and wants the exact same priorities from the president. That's never the case in a political movement. This is where Barack Obama, for example, found himself struggling when he was dealing with things like Guantanamo. And people were like, wait a minute, what are you doing about that? That's not what right? I mean, there's always over time in a political movement, people say, that's not what I thought MAGA was, or this is what MAGA should be. And we're seeing the cracks in the armor, if you will, the chinks in the armor, the cracks in the wall about the MAGA movement. Because to your point, Mark, these things sort of chip away, right? For some people, the Epstein files have been everything, right? That is the litmus test. But for others, it's, look, we don't want to support fill in the blank, right? We don't want to give way to China on anything. We don't necessarily want to be part of any coalition in the Middle East, right? It's basically us and Israel or the highway. I mean, you could go down a long list of things where, MAGA people say it's the priority, but not all of them. And so the president is dealing with some of that. And some of what we're seeing now is, and people are citing this reversal on Epstein as, this is the first time this president has been forced by his base and forced by members of Congress. Witness Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, who'd have thunk a year ago that she would be a superstar on CNN right now because of her standing up, absolutely straight as a rail against the president. So we're seeing, Mark, the bottom line is we're seeing chinks in the armor. We're seeing some of the coalition being chipped away. And so for the long term, what does it mean? Who knows? I mean, by the time we get to a re-elect for a J.D. Vance in terms of the presidency, maybe in 28, MAGA could look substantially different and not nearly as unified as it does now.
Yeah, in that spirit, Tony, will you play for Gary Trump getting off the plane last night from Mar-a-Lago? He doesn't want to hang on the weekend at the White House because all that construction's going on. I want you to hear a little bit of him talking about, and this segues into the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is Venezuela. He talks about Marjorie Taylor Greene. He calls her Marjorie Trader Greene now. Tony, are you still? Yeah. And then and then he gets into Venezuela, and then I want to comment on Venezuela. Go ahead, Tony, please.
I'd talk to anybody. We'll see what happens.
Green says her life could be in danger because of the rhetoric.
Her life is in danger? Who's that?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, she says.
Marjorie Trader Greene. I don't think her life is in danger. Frankly, I don't think anybody cares about her. Okay, what about you?
Are you negotiating with lawmakers on health care ahead of a vote next month?
We're negotiating with lawmakers, and I've had personal talks with some Democrats. I can't tell you who they are. I just don't want to do that. It's not fair to them. About paying large amounts of dollars back to the people. You know, this was my idea. It came up during that. You know, oftentimes under times of stress, like the shutdown, you come up with great ideas that you wouldn't have thought of before. The insurance companies are making a fortune. Their stock is up over 1,000% over a short period of time. They are taking in hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're not really putting it back, certainly not like they should. So when I see this, and when I've seen this over the last pretty short period of time, I said, why do we just pay this money directly to the people of our country and let them buy their own health insurance? And you know, I made that statement, and I made it a little bit cavalierly, but it sounded good. And everybody has picked it up, including Democrats. And I am talking to some Democrats right now about doing that. People love it. We're going to take the money, well, if it gets approved, we're going to take the money, we're going to pay it back to the people of our country to go out and buy health insurance. Now, they can put it in a health account. We can do it a lot of different ways. But they buy their own health insurance. They can negotiate price. And it's going to be locked, so they can't go out and buy a Cadillac. They can go out and buy health insurance.
Okay, that wasn't Venezuela, but it does get me to, in my judgment, that was just a bucket of stream of consciousness. I'm struggling because I'm being polite right now, but it's an utterly ridiculous word salad that was going on there. Oh, and to be, again, I don't mean to be disrespectful, especially to you or a distinguished political commentator. So what I mean by that is he, on one level, if you really try to kind of decode it, was talking about the same thing that Obama had done with the Affordable Care Act. That it's a negotiation, right, that you have with these insurance companies in this marketplace. He was also right. Trump is correct when he talks about the fact that I mentioned this on the show many times, that the huge scandal among the other scandals with healthcare is that there are the insurance companies that are just middlemen to everything that you're getting. So that's the reason this system is so broken and so very expensive. But there, during his comments, he said, so we're going to give you this money so that you can, pay the insurance companies. Well, the insurance companies are the problem, dude. You just said the insurance companies were the issue. So you can see how tough it is to really come up with any kind of revolutionary change in the way there can be an institutional change in American healthcare. So there was a lot going on there. Comment on that, and then Venezuela. I'll ask you about Venezuela.
Yeah, I'll do real quick out of that. First, I'll do insurance and a real quick comment about Marjorie Taylor Greene. So the insurance thing is really interesting to me because here's a Republican president that, famously in his first part of his second term, he was taking on big pharmas, in a big way, at least rhetorically, and now insurance. I mean, this is one of the most interesting components of Trump to people who have, watched politics more broadly, is that you could have, some of that rhetoric you just heard from him could come out of Bernie Sanders' mouth, right? And that is the remarkable thing about Trump, is that his populist instincts when it comes to politics sometimes bleed over way out of a traditional Republican lane into things. Imagine him standing at a podium with Bernie and who knows, Elizabeth Warren stuff, saying, yeah, we're going to stick it to the insurance companies. We're going this route. It might happen. Let's see where this thing goes. So as far as Marjorie Taylor Greene goes, this is a really interesting one to me because now it's all of a sudden a Republican ally enemy. Trump is pretty wily this way. And he realizes he's taken some hits from his MAGA base, but he may have more to gain in some purple districts by taking on one of the lightning rods of the MAGA movement, in the long term. We'll see where that goes as well.
The movement of major military hardware off the coast of Venezuela, the conversations around Venezuela, and the idea somehow that Venezuela is this key piece of some narcotics trafficking international ring that continues to plague the U.S. It's a different flex for Donald Trump. It's a dangerous flex, in my judgment. I think in relation to what we were talking about, the MAGA base, they can't be happy that this peace president is now, again, beginning to move the chess pieces in place to attack Venezuela with some kind of land action. But even before you get to that, having blown away all of these boats, some of them were not narcotics related. I was reading a long account today about families looking for their, demanding actually retribution of some kind of justice from the U.S. because they've killed the head of the family, the father of the family, who was a fisherman. So point, though, take that out. MAGA can't be happy with that. But I'm wondering more to the point, how you see Venezuela and this president acting in Venezuela, and whether or not it could literally just be moving this hardware offshore as a kind of saber rattling and nothing actually moves beyond that.
Yeah, well, there is a larger geopolitical, you could say, very covert almost battle going on for the Americas, and that is China's move into South America. And this is something you may have heard about this in the last week, Mark. This is something that I think almost universally every American president has drawn a line, not in the sand, but in the oceans around the Americas, right? And there's been this notion, it goes way back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Look, nobody is going to mess with the Americas. That's our part of the world, right? Our part of the hemisphere. And so this has a long presidential tradition, of like, look, nobody's going to mess around with us. And so part of it is drug related. I have no doubt about that. Do you need to send the biggest aircraft carrier, the biggest warship in the world? I mean, every defense expert says, look, come on. I mean, Venezuela, yes, they have a military. Yes, it's been upgraded. They have a mishmash of actually former Soviet era fighters, a few American ones. They've got so there's not any real, how do we say this, military challenge to dealing with Venezuela. That's not what it's about. If there was any conflict, it would end very shortly with American military might just overwhelming the Venezuelans. There's also very clearly no appetite in the Pentagon, no appetite in Congress for putting American boots on the ground in Venezuela.
Well, a general resigned, just to your point. A general resigned over this.
I don't think anybody has any sense that is really going to go anywhere. Even now, there's people really raising questions about even any kind of an airstrike inside Venezuela. So bottom line, Mark, to your point, I see this more as Trump just saying, look, if anybody thinks either as a nation state down there or certainly as China that you're going to start messing with, with anything within 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles of our coastline, that's not going to happen.
I see. So this is a message that you're seeing him sending. Is that what I see in the gate, Tony? Is that Trump talking about Venezuela? Or, let's just watch a second of it. Then I have a theory to run past you on this, so I want to get your thought. Go ahead.
The U.S. with Venezuela, or is all our action still?
Yeah, we have great support because it's all about drugs. Well, in Venezuela's case, it's about drugs, and it's also about thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that they've released into our country. And some are gang members from Tren de Aragua. Some are many are drug dealers. Some are murderers. So in the case of Venezuela, it's the prison population. Their almost entire prison population was released into the United States. You know what that means? Their prison population was released into the United States. And we're getting it out. We're doing an amazing job. We have a strong border now. We have everything. Our country's doing so well.
Okay, so that is kind of I feel like that's a version of him playing the hits, like, they released all of these nasty people into our country. So anyway, that was a bit of Trump, and you've made it clear what you think may be underlying all of this. Let me just try one last theory on you, and just stay with me. Regime change in Venezuela is what the Americans really want, okay, is the way the theory would go. And what's in Venezuela that the Americans want? It ain't stopping the narcotics trade, it's oil. And that this is about a regime friendly toward the Americans such that the Americans have a connection now to the oil. Can you speak to that theory?
Yeah, well, look, Venezuela is seen as, the major oil pipeline from South America, and they have vast resources. Why do you think, Xi has been cozying up to Venezuela? Okay, it's not because he just can't wait to have a vacation on the northern coast of South America. This Venezuela is a major power player in this hemisphere in the South, and both superpowers are well aware of that. When Trump starts banging the drum again about immigration, that is something that, as you know, Mark, does resonate with the MAGA base. So that could bolster his support from his base dealing with Venezuela. It's much like the Middle East when it comes to the oil thing, Mark. People always say, when you talk about the Middle East, insert as a middle name oil. Middle Oil East, right? I mean, for decades, that's been the trope related to the Middle East. But increasingly, the reserves in places like Mexico and Venezuela, the whole energy production capacity possibilities in South America, to some degree, Brazil. We don't have time to get into it today, but Gavin Newsom touring Brazil, many of the rainforests down there have been negatively affected by oil production in Brazil, in the Amazon. So this has become more widely thought of as a potential energy partner or resource. We always look to the Middle East, but not exclusively anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest oil reserves are in Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. So that just lets you know. Yeah, sorry, but against that backdrop, all of this is going on. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Right.
Gary, out of time. Thank you so much. You're always generous with your time. Thanks for joining us on Mondays. Appreciate you being here, my friend.
Of course,
Thank you.
Mark, have a fantastic show, buddy.
Gary Dietrich, everybody. And Gary Dietrich's segment is brought to you by Bill Campbell at RE/MAX Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional. Bill Campbell is your guy. RE/MAX Gold is your place. Call or text him. You can text him at 530-448-7474. Call or text Bill, 530-448-7474. It's Bill Campbell at RE/MAX Gold.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.